We initially met via a little message on Twitter, essentially. So I had admired Sebastian's work for a long time and sparked up a meeting. Ideas started to grow from there, but I don't think at that point we had any idea how
or what we would do.
Yeah. What or how.
Similarly, you know, I had a great deal of interest in working with Laura because I'd followed her work for a very long time as well. So
my goal is the spectacle and the mass and the accumulation, and then the material allows me to do that, but the material is almost second.
There's a question that Laura asked at the very beginning of this when we was looking at the site in Clerkenwell, which I'd never even contemplated asking about an object that I would make, which is, what is it doing? You know, I mean, to me, you know, what is a piece of furniture doing? Well, it's sitting quietly in the corner, out the way, serving its time for the next 100 years in your family home. It's not making a spectacle of itself.
Well, what is it? Yeah, but they can be very quiet. These pieces can be...
Absolutely,
What is it doing? Well, is it actually sitting quietly? Is it just breathing? Is it very discreet? Or is it trying to talk about the weight of the material? There's all sorts of reasons to ask why something is there, and then you see we were into the slight quagmire of form and exactly what kind of form that would take. That's when it kind of got quite sort of rounded, and it wasn't
oniony.
Yeah, and we were sort of
yeah.
But
that's another really interesting thing, is that the form didn't come until the very, like, we started this back in November, I think, and there was pretty much, I mean, Laura actively sketches as she talks, and I just kind of will say something and then illustrate it. But Laura filled up a sketchbook in our initial kind of inquiry into this, and that wasn't even thinking about the form. So every single sentence starts with, not this, it's not going to look like this, but what if we did, you know, and it was kind of, it's an expression of the reasonings behind the thing and why it might look this particular way, but not any consideration at all as to how the thing's going to look.
You see, I would never draw how my willow fits together. It's irrelevant. Well, it's not irrelevant because it's in my head, but I don't need to draw it on a piece of paper. But there are so many different ways and techniques and joints.
Yeah. So I use a 2H pencil. Because it's nice sharp point, it stays sharp all day in the workshop, and Laura at our first meeting produced a 6B, which I hadn't seen before.
Which offended you a lot.
Yeah, it did. And the lines were sort of maybe 3mm thick, which you can't make furniture to that, you know.
I mean, my work's incredibly precise in its own way, but there's a completely different approach, which I will look forward to integrating, actually.
In some instances, depending on what we're doing, working to 0.1 of a millimetre, which is, you probably don't take a pair of calipers to site when you're doing your...
And actually I was going to say that, I mean, I don't rule out the use of tools, but you've seen my range of my tools. I bought one pair of secateurs with me.
That's it.
And that's my toolkit. My toolkit is a radio and a flask and a pair of secateurs. That's it. So, and I don't...
And lots of tape.
And yeah, that's true. But it's not that I think that using tools is a bad thing whatsoever, but I quite admire the way that different processes and different equipment can actually add to the overall.
And that's been interesting for me as well. I mean, obviously, I hand make stuff, but actually my hands never actually cut or manipulate wood. There's always a bit of metal between me and the wood. So to get to the end of this project where we're now sort of in the weaving stages, kind of finishing this thing up, to actually be learning from Laura about how to feel that within the way it twists and the way, which I think I had an intuition for, but there are certain things that you need to look for and feel, and knowing the direction of flow for the bigger picture as well. You know, it's all very well and good focusing in on this one, what we're calling swathe that you're weaving, but knowing that this one needs to be doing something independent of the one down in this corner, but they both relate. So, and that's something that I've learned as well, is kind of this thinking about scale. The thing that we've both brought in equal measure is the pulling out the comfort zone of the other person, which has been quite interesting. So, you know, I can remember phoning Laura up to ask her if we could just drop it down a layer, and her saying no, because we had to keep the scale. Had David said, you know, we want to showstopper, and I was doing it on my own, I don't know what I would have done, but it wouldn't have been nearly as interesting as this. because what we were asked to do at the very beginning, and absolutely, you know, credit to David and the American Hardwood Export Council for inviting us to push their material beyond what we don't expect to see American cherry used in sort of steamed and woven. You know, we don't expect this to be kind of the future of the material, but to invite us to kind of push it way beyond its limits. And Laura sort of being a catalyst for that, kind of make this thing malleable with your hands.
We have got some ideas in the pipeline of things that we would like to work together with. Maybe on a smaller scale actually, but possibly things that are more handleable and ownable.
Perhaps we would invert it again by doing something potentially a product but made in Laura's environment, rather than a grand scale commission made in my environment. Who knows? But you know, there are so many things that we could potentially invert to make something interesting happen again.
Yeah, that would be a joy.